Okay, cool. Should I go live? Yeah.
Probier das so und ich stelle dich nicht mehr hin. Und dann mach das so. Sieht man dann was dahinter, weil ich stehe ja hier.
Ja, easy.
Sieht man das hinter?
Ja.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to introduce you. We're using the
Well, this is picking up a lot of episodes.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. And so we just try to find. I'll just speak out loud.
Yeah. Karaoke. But I don't know how it sounds.
Yeah, I guess I'm question is I can do it because
I tried to help.
Do you do any music?
Just asking my students.
I'll probably be here,
Yeah.
and then come sit down here, and
It's gonna be alright.
so you're just testing the video.
Yeah.
Cool.
So you're gonna say something?
Yeah, I'm just gonna announce JD.
You stand on that side, that possible, right there.
We try to speak it in like you would do, like, right?
Okay, sure. Hi everyone, my name is Andres Morales. That work?
It's delayed.
It's like I don't know if I have a mic. Oh, that's
It's alright.
okay.
Yeah. Do this.
Okay.
Yeah.
It should be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll start here. This is the intro video session. There's a speed meeting happening in the virtual room. Yeah. Cool.
Still hear one.
Ich will ja auch nicht zu wegstellen. Weil das ist ja das Wichtigste.
Das geht ja auch. Letztes Diskussion hier, weil hier sind die Leute. Ich weiß nicht, wie viele Leute kommen auf diese Sitzung.
Yeah.
Is it important to see that what's behind you?
I mean, it'd be good to see it, but it's not.
Ja, das ist besser, weil das Gegenlicht.
True.
Andreas sitzt da.
It's always your company.
Yeah, it is.
Are you fine with that? Yeah. Okay. Is it? Okay, everyone, my name is Andres. I'm a volunteer here and moderator of this room. I just wanted to welcome JD. He's going to give a talk on introduction to EA or EA conferences. So yeah, let's welcome Ricky. Thank you.
All right, welcome. Hi, everyone. And we're going to talk first-timers at the EA conference. It's good to see you all here. If you're watching online, thanks for joining online. And yeah, I want to start out with this question. When in your life did you first experience deep struggle? When in your life did you first experience something that really challenged you, that really an instance where you brushed up with deep suffering? For me, I was 17. It was a very difficult time. School was cruel. I just experienced the first serious relationship breakup. I was very filled with remorse also for having been a very bad friend to a good friend of mine at the time. And what's more, I was losing my faith. I couldn't see how God in a world filled with suffering could be good and powerful and loving. And isn't this like a frustrating thing for all of us? I mean, we all experience this. We all experience moments of suffering in various different ways. And it's especially acute when it's us. It's not in some far off land or some distant person, but it's our own life. And of course, like my suffering was comparatively modest by many global standards. And I know I wasn't the first one to feel abandoned. The Psalms are full of verses from King David, who was pursued relentlessly in the desert by someone who hated him, somebody who wanted him dead. And this was all despite God's anointing. David was doing what God was calling him to do. I wonder if some of us feel this way sometime. You know, David, he wondered where God was. He said in Psalm 42, "O God, my rock, why have you forgotten me? Why must I wander around in grief, oppressed by my enemies? Their taunts break my bones. They scoff. Where is this God of yours? Why am I discouraged? Why is my heart so sad?" Then he concludes, "I'll put my hope in God. I will praise him again." And I think that's really interesting that David, amidst his suffering, he still found reason for hope and perseverance. And so I took inspiration from David, and I decided to pray the Psalms in this time of my life. And I asked God, God, where are you? If you're real, show yourself powerfully to me in the midst of my suffering, and assure me of your presence. And for some reason on that day, God answered. I still remember I was sitting at the kitchen and I was praying, and I just had this overwhelming sense of peace, of love, of the presence of someone else that loved me unconditionally. And it was powerful. It was liberating. It was the kind of experience that resonated with this verse I read later from Paul in Galatians, where it says, "We have the Spirit in our hearts that cries out, Abba, Father." And I'm so grateful that I lived through this, to have this encounter, to have experienced what I think, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think this was God. And I'm so grateful that I've had so many other blessings in my life as well. And I hope that's the same for you, that even in the midst of your suffering, you've had these blessings and redeeming experiences. But many have not yet found God, or are otherwise suffering tremendously in many ways. Forget this kind of dark turn, but to be perfectly blunt, there are many people who will die of a preventable disease before they grow old enough to powerfully encounter God or experience any of the blessings and riches of this life. In 2021 alone, about 5 million children under the age of 5 died. And UNESCO, who cites this quote, sees this as progress because this is actually a lower figure than we saw for many decades before. Of course, with COVID and the aftermath of the downturn following, it's expected this might tick up for years 2022 and 2023. But there are many people who will die before they ever get to experience these blessings. Plus, that isn't the only barrier. Like David, many people are persecuted by unjust regimes and systems. Many others are desperate for food to put on the table or for dignity. Others are hungry for meaning and for spiritual life. Many will not encounter God's presence on this side of life. And what's more, Many more may never come to be. After all, if extreme risks from climate change, biological weapons, or advanced artificial intelligence come to pass, we could see a global catastrophe that may mean that many people may never come into existence. And one particular risk we hear a lot about in the news is this risk of superhuman or advanced artificial intelligence. In fact, here in this graph, we see a recent poll from 2016 of a few hundred subject area experts. And these are their estimates of how long it will take before we reach human-level machine intelligence. These are intelligent AI systems that are able to do what humans can do in a wide range of things, a wide range of fields and domains, and can do it in an integrated way. This is really powerful technology, and most experts think we're going to reach this before the end of the century. It could be a great thing, but it could also be wonderful. It can unlock considerable risks from various different factors, and that could be a really awful thing. There might be many people who could exist in the future who might not if such a catastrophe, like a future nuclear war or some kind of fallout from some existential crisis were to occur. So let's not sugarcoat the situation in the world. You know, like all the progress we've made in modern times, things aren't perfect. We don't live in Eden where all was right between God and man and creation. We also don't live in the eschaton where everything is already made new, or that we can even perfectly create today the perfection that's awaiting us in the new heavens and the new earth. We live in today. And for many people, today could be wonderful, it could be awful. Same thing for tomorrow. So it's natural to see all the challenges in the world on all these different fronts. It can be a bit overbearing. We might find ourselves asking, how can I really change things? How can I really make an impact? I'm JD, just one person. I just have one specialty in my one job. How do I go about really affecting change? Of course, we pray in the Lord's Prayer, our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And that's good. I think we should continue to remember the world's problems in our prayers. But we should do more than pray. We should also think, and we should also act. And that's really the starting point for anybody who wants to seriously, I believe, engage with this world, and especially with the themes of effective altruism, which is what this conference is all about. Effective altruism is two things. One, it's an idea, the idea of using reason and evidence to find the very best ways to improve the world, and then to take action on that basis. Two, it's a movement or a community of people who have just gathered around this idea, and all over the world. We're here in London. I'm from DC, and we think this is a really exciting way to not just talk about doing good or pray about doing good, but also thinking carefully and critically about how we can put this into our lives. And I have here the logo of Effective Altruism. This is a light bulb with a heart inside. So that kind of combines the heart of doing with the head of doing good. So what happens if you use reason and your heart to find ways to do good in the world? Where does that lead you? And what are some of the concrete upshots from effective altruism? What are the big ideas? If you ask people within the movement, I think you'll come across these things. The first thing you can do to have a radical impact is to give radically. And this is really old school effective altruism, and I think this is the core of what the movement is really about. One of the key upshots is how do we use the resources we have, especially our financial resources to give, but also other resources as well, to give in very effective ways. The reality is that many of us in this room are incredibly privileged. I know it's kind of a worn message. We've all heard this before. In this graph is from 2008, and I'm reciting it in 2023. But the message holds true. If we are college educated, university educated in the West, or we are educated and talented anywhere in the world, we have a pretty incredible opportunity. One of these opportunities is just through our direct earnings. I mean, if you look at the global income distribution, and you look at the average salary of a college graduate, I checked in the US, it's still about this number, about $55,000 a year is the average starting salary. that puts you roughly in the top 97 to 99% of global income. That is a huge blessing. That's a huge amount of resource that God has entrusted us with. We're not better or special because we can command higher wages. Our worth isn't measured up in how much we earn, but it is a resource. And it's just a very shocking fact of the world that we can use this money in incredibly transformative ways. So against Malaria Foundation and others like it, like the Malaria Consortium, are able to distribute bed nets in a way that we know through rigorous studies save a life for about every $5,500 donated. That's on the margin. So today, if you were to donate $5,500 to the Malaria Consortium, in about 6 months, a few hundred bed nets would be distributed in a way that we know on average adds 30 years to people's lives. These are years that people can use to lead fulfilled lives. And that's a lot of money, but that's also not a lot of money, like for a life. And I know this is a warm message if you've been in effective altruism for a while, but we need to keep saying it because it's still a radical and powerful message. And money isn't just about saving lives, it's also a tool for promoting justice in this world. I have a quote here from John Wesley, who talked about money as this gift from God. Actually, Wesley was so frustrated that Christians talked about doing good all the time, but didn't actually make sacrifice and give radically. In fact, he thought that the greatest problem with the Methodist Church that he founded was that it wasn't radical with its money. If you read his writings, he said that he thinks it's actually it's going to be the downfall of his church. And he thought that even if I can fill a room with 100 people, only a handful are actually going to give radically. And I think that handful might actually be in this room, which is why I'm very excited to be talking about this. But this money can be used not just to save lives, but also to provide services. Like we can provide so many meaningful human services to people who are deeply suffering. And we have people throughout this conference actually talking all about that. Joy will be talking soon about how we can scale evidence-based depression treatment for the vulnerable, especially among refugees in Ecuador, and there are many other ways that you can spend money effectively. I want to tell a quick story of somebody who has done this, who's really inspired me. This is Oliver. Oliver is based in the US. He lived in California for a long time, worked at Google, and was a programmer, and commanded a very high salary. He's a Christian, and he was convicted by what the Bible says about money and about giving. And so he started to cut costs everywhere he could. He started to live within more modest means. I mean, he earned, I don't think he might be sure, he earned over $250,000 a year. And he lived on what was a very lower, basically at the poverty line. I mean, he lived in a van. He lived in a van for 4 years. This is a picture of his van on the left. And on the right, you can see where he slept and how he slept. And he lived in this parking lot on the Google campus and gave away about over 90% of his income. He'll tell you that doesn't mean much because he still paid a lot of money living in California. But he did this because Jesus changed his life and he knew he could use these resources to give radically and to help others. Oliver, really wonderful person. If you want to hear more about his story, we actually have a video on our YouTube where he shares. So I encourage you to check that out later. But the second way, so effective altruism, it really gives us this upshot that we can give effectively, or give radically. I think that's core in the biblical message. But we can also prioritize effectiveness. We can give effectively. We can also pursue careers that are effective. And here I have an image of a sightseeing dog. It's a puppy. My wife and I, we recently got a puppy. It's definitely like our pet cause. We love dogs. And who isn't passionate about this? And who isn't passionate about sightseeing dogs who can help the blind navigate around the streets of London, right? Like that's an important cause. And giving to almost any cause is a good thing if it's a good cause. But we live in a world today where trade-offs exist. The cost from guidedogs.org to train a guide dog, I could be incorrect, but I believe the current estimate is somewhere around $65,000 to train one single guide dog. And I just want to make the point that there exists currently today many people who are suffering from trachoma, which is a disease where ingrown eyelids actually scratch the cornea of your eye. And over time, this causes blindness. But this is a perfectly treatable disease. We know how to treat it. And we've been doing this for decades, actually. And the current cost to treat trachoma is somewhere around $20 to $40 a patient. And if you do a rough cost estimate, you can provide a site for hundreds, maybe thousands of people for the same cost of training one seeing eye doc. Now, maybe it's different if someone you personally know, or your partner or your family is living in London and need to see an eye doc. These are tricky cases, but there are trade-offs when we're giving to help other people, and we should be mindful of those trade-offs. So I want to do a quick quiz right now. I'm going to test your effectiveness intuitions, and forgive me if you've taken this quiz before, but I want to look at which intervention best improves school attendance for girls in East Africa per dollar spent. So I'm going to show you a list of interventions, and I want you to maybe hold up a finger, if you will, to give your guess, lock in your guess for what you think is the most effective at improving school attendance in East Africa. So is it A, or 1, providing free school uniforms? Is it 2, giving cash to families who send their daughters to school? 3, awarding merit-based scholarships for girls? Or 4, telling parents how much more their children are likely to earn in the future? So I'll give you like 10 seconds, think it over. Okay, hold up your finger. I want to see what everyone's guessing. Can't look at anybody else's guess. You have to do a guess. Okay, awesome. I think when I first did this quiz, I thought that the answer was 3. It seemed like, incentives-based. And it's not the worst option. It does better than conditional cash transfers. Free uniforms actually more effective. This was conducted by JPAL. They do studies for effectiveness of development interventions. But actually, if you compare these to the benefits of informing parents of sending their kids to school, it just dwarfs in comparison. These are all different programs that have the same stated outcome in mind. Like, the goal here is to get girls in school and to get them educated. We can discuss like what are the goals we should optimize for, but if we have a goal set in mind, we should care about effectiveness. I think that's a part of being a good steward of what God has entrusted us with. And that goes not just for where we give, but that also goes for our careers. That goes for the problems we choose to invest our careers. I mean, our time is a huge resource that we have. How many of us have heard about 80,000 hours, that resource? I think probably everyone in this room and many people watching. 80,000 hours, it's an org that helps advise people on how they can have an impactful career. And they have found that, well, you have about 80,000 hours in your career. If you do the math, it's about 40 hours a week for 50 weeks a year for 40 years. It's 80,000 hours. If you can make that just a little bit better, that would be a huge deal. You might want to spend a few hours every month or every year just thinking about career effectiveness. And that's what we're doing. That's one of the things we're doing here at this conference. We're talking not just about where to give and how to give effectively, but how we can use our careers to really prioritize causes that matter. I'm going to make an analogy from this graph here, which shows the range of cost effectiveness between different interventions in global health for a specific measure, the Dolly measure. And what you'll see is that I don't remember the fancy math term, like log normal or something, but there's like a few interventions here that are far out in a way, the most impactful on the Dolly scale. And it shows that like the best interventions are many hundreds, maybe even thousands of times more impactful than the average. And what if this is true for our careers as well? What if it's true that there's a career that God could be calling us towards that is far and away much more impactful than we could ever imagine for ourselves or do otherwise? So I want to jump into this a bit by telling a story. I want to tell a story of Katie, who has been involved with our community at times, and she is based in the US. And Katie worked as a consultant in healthcare, and she did this for a while in a for-profit company, and found after a while that it does pay the bills, it does make a lot of money, and it gives her skills. But after she's learned a lot from this job, she realized, I'm not really making the impact in the world that I think God's calling me to have. And this sense that she had was confirmed after she did the St. I think it's St. Anselm's monastic community in London. I don't know if anybody's heard of that. I think someone at this conference actually is in that. And she decided to switch careers. She decided to work and apply her optimization skills that she used in healthcare consulting to help nonprofits in the global health space have more effective interventions. She's been working with the Schistosomiasis Foundation, SCIF, and SCIF Foundation. And she oversees like basically measuring for effectiveness for about 60 million treatments of schistosomiasis treatments every year. This is to stop basically a parasitic worm that causes infections, especially in the global south. So really awful thing. Anyways, she switched careers based off effectiveness, and she'll tell you like her day job is so much more fulfilling, and her impact is so much more now because she's using her talents for good and for impact. So could you maybe think about going about this? Maybe you're open to switching careers. Maybe you're not even sure like where you should start, how to choose a career for impact. Well, there's this heuristic that many of us in this community use, and it's called the ITN framework. So it's an acronym. I stands for important. You can think of your career area as tackling, ideally, a cause that's very important. This is a cause where basically the suffering of many people is very great. A big scale problem might be a problem like climate change or global poverty. All else equal, it's good to tackle problems that are important. The N stands for neglectedness. Many problems receive lots of attention. Seeing eye dogs in London, lots of attention. Everybody loves puppies. Everybody wants to help abandoned puppies, right? Show me a person who doesn't want to help abandoned puppies. I don't know. But those are already getting lots of resources. So it's good to invest our careers for things that aren't getting much resources. I think there's also a key biblical principle here as well, that God cares for those who are neglected, for those who are vulnerable. And we can care as well through our careers by focusing on causes that maybe aren't fancy by worldly standards, but are ones where there's a lot of impact. And then finally, tractability or progressibility. Can we really make progress in this, right? If we were to tackle climate change or tackle helping abandoned puppies in London, these are different levels of solvability, right? And ideally, we choose careers that tackle problems that are a good mix of really important problems that are very neglected and that we can actually make progress in. So I just want to jump through real quick as I wrap up here a few of the problems that EAs, many people in the effective altruism community care about. And the first one I've talked about quite a lot already. And this is this cause of global health and development. There are about 6 million people every year who, it's about 5 from the UNESCO quote earlier, 6 million children who die every year from preventable causes. This is something that is a huge scale in terms of neglectedness. It is pretty neglected. They're dying not because we don't know how to help them, but because people are choosing not to help them. And it's very solvable. We know how to do it. Another cause that many care about is the cause of animal suffering or animal cruelty. I don't know how many loose dogs there are on the street of London, but there are about 60 billion farm animals raised for food every year. And some of the conditions that we keep them in are pretty atrocious. I'm not saying we all have to go vegan or vegetarian. That'd be cool. But what we could do is improve standards on farms to help billions of animals. And we know how to do that. There are plenty of ways that we've done that in the past, and we know how to do it in the future. Some other risks that I touched on earlier, risks from nuclear war, risks from artificial intelligence or from pandemics. Many in this community were really concerned about pandemics long before COVID came. And I think there's a lesson there that we can learn. And then also, as Christians, there are other causes we'll care about as well. So causes about how do we encourage people's faith. There are billions who identify as a non-Christian, or even if we're not openly trying to proselytize, we can support people who are Christian in maybe very cost-effective ways. And this is something we can analyze from an ITN scale. It's very hard to do. This is an ecumenical community, and I'm not going to tell you how you should do it, but this is something we can talk about. So in summary, we can reasonably have a huge impact if we do these 3 things. We can give radically, we can pursue effectiveness in our giving and our careers, and let's tackle important problems with our careers. So, at times when you think about these problems, it's really overwhelming. the problems of the world are great, but we know from the words of Jesus in Scripture that he has overcome the world. And we see in his life, death, and resurrection this Easter season a wonderful reminder of that. So ultimately, this is not a message of fear, but a message of hope. And the story for you in your lives this weekend, it's not a message of fear, but it's a message of hope, that God is doing a wonderful work in each of you. And hopefully that we as a community can support each other in helping us to pursue vocations that have a very, very high impact. I'm reminded in the story of Esther, where Esther saves the Jews, and Haman, I think her uncle, comes at the end after she saved the Jews. And God is never mentioned in the story, by the way. God is in between the lines, like he is in many of our stories, right? But Haman comes to Esther and he says, who knows that you were born for such a time as this? And I think if we could all just step back and hear that message ourselves, just imagine someone saying to us, referring to God's providential placing of us in this place and time, who knows but that you were born for such a time as the 21st century in central London to use your career and your resources to have a massive impact for the world and for God's kingdom. I think that's a message we can all hear. And the question is, how are you going to respond? What are you going to do with this weekend? We have a lot of sessions that I think are really good. You don't have to like them all, but I'm sure you'll like some. And here are a couple practical ideas for maybe possible. You're not supposed to tell someone what you want them to do if you want them to do it. But I think it would be great if you took a giving pledge, like a 10% pledge of your income. My wife and I did this. We have so much to learn in our generosity, but we're so grateful that we are at least giving something, and we can grow from this 10% pledge. We can grow to give more and to give it more effectively. You can take that pledge at givingwhatwecan.org, I believe. So I really encourage us all, if we're in this community, to consider taking this pledge. Second, we can maybe confirm our sense of calling, where we think God might be calling us to work and to do with our lives. And then maybe connect with others in a supportive community. You can use the Swap Card app to book one-on-ones with random people here. And they're not random. These are other Christians or people interested in faith, not all of us Christians, but people interested in Christianity at the very least, who want to explore what it means to as a Christian engaging with effective altruism, to have an impact and support others in that. So book one-on-one chats with people in the Swap Card. There's a garden for that, and lots of good groups. So that is the intro to this conference, and yeah, thanks for listening to the talk. So I'll just handle the Q&A, but maybe you can check the Swap Card or the Slido in case there are any from anyone possibly watching online. But as you do that, does anybody have any questions about the conference, about effective altruism? Any questions in general?
So that's a big question that maybe we'll come back to in the next couple of days. But has effective altruism looked at impact investing as well as donor giving to charities? As in, is it only focused on charitable impact, or does it look at impact for enterprises, businesses as well?
That's a good question. So to repeat it, in case you didn't pick up on the microphone, the question was something like, has effective altruism, the community, or maybe this one, considered impact investing as a form for impact as opposed to other forms of giving?
And potentially also then, obviously, the financial, it changes all the financial numbers, right? Because you are going to be giving.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say I'm a financial planner or an expert with this in any way, but when I know there are many individuals in the EA community who've done analyses of impact investing, and many of them have come up short. So EA is, in principle, cause neutral. And if impact investing is the way we should go, let's all just invest our money impactfully and do that sustainably. And so I'm not now. It just is the case that most who've looked into this, from my understanding, have found it's many times less effective than direct giving. You can talk to Graydon about this if he knows more about this, as well as some others working in finance. Yeah.
My question is, obviously this is such an important thing, like as well, but not many people know about it, and especially I think the younger generation, like Generation Z, who potentially will be the most impactful in this world, like in 2 years' time. So how can we, what's the best way that we can tell them about this model so that like, you know, they grow up knowing that they can have potential, like really impactful careers, they can give out, they can like really help to solve the goals, with problems, like what would be the best way essentially to evangelize this to like this generation?
Well, you can work with us. We've in part been looking to do that. I think our community is first and foremost trying to support Christians who are in the EA movement, but also trying to reach out and share this message with others as well. It's a hard message. My personal view is that this isn't a message that everybody's ready to hear, especially the giving message, but also just optimization. Not everybody's wired this way, right? God has created us to think in different ways, and while I think it is clear that some causes and interventions are more effective than others, it's not the case that if we tell people that they're always going to respond best to that. So maybe we should be pragmatic about who we share this message with. Yeah, I think that's just how it is. I think there are lots of open questions about how we can shape public consciousness, especially in the church, about this. So I think part of this conference is an exploration of those ideas. And I'm happy to talk more kind of like what's worked, what hasn't worked, and so forth. But really good question, both of them. Yeah.
Thanks. I was just wondering, because I was looking at some of the documentation of the theory of change document, and it mentioned as an intermediate goal, reducing cognitive dissonance for Christians engaging in the EA community. So I'm just wondering, like, I guess that came from like a community survey or something, but what kind of cognitive dissonances tend to come up? Because I think in the presentation it didn't sound like there was too much dissonance there. And, you know, I don't think there is too much dissonance there. But so where does the kind of dissonance show up?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So to repeat the question, it's a question about in EA for Christians' theory of change document, one of the intermediary goals is to reduce cognitive dissonance, particularly around being a Christian and also engaging with the effective altruism community. I'm not totally sure, but I'll maybe like give a few ideas. So one idea is maybe that the EA community can be quite all-consuming and quite intense for people involved with it. It can ask a lot of you. That's a feature as well as a potential downfall. And the EA community is largely secular. It's about 80+% people who identify as agnostic or atheists. And just as an atheist who walks in it, well, I won't make this comparison, but I think it is the case that if you're in a room where many people are just of a different core identity, identifies differently than you on something as core as religion, you could feel a bit outcast. And, we want to support Christians who could potentially feel that way in the EA movement, not to draw them out from the EA movement, but to support them within it. Yeah, I don't think they're dissonant though. I mean, I'm super bullish on the intersection. I think this question about like how do we spread this message and how do we get more people on board, to me it's just about like what's the most pragmatic way to do it. Yeah.
So you think like the cause is aligned, like across the secular Christian communities, the cause is largely aligned?
So the four main causes of effective altruism: global health and poverty, animal cruelty or animal welfare, we might say, EA community building, and risks from existential risks. Yeah, I think these broadly track. You might find like a cause or a intervention here or there that may be a bit jarring or maybe isn't the one that most Christians would choose to prioritize. But effective altruism writ large is something that Christians should absolutely get behind, in my view. Otherwise, yeah. Are there any Slido questions by chance? If not, that's any other questions? We have time for one or two more. Yeah, we are.
Can I ask what you think about the more recent or fairly recent move of the religion?
Yeah, absolutely. So Liora asked what I think about the fairly recent move within the effective altruism community towards long-termism. And Leora is a philosopher, so she might be thinking of several kinds of long-termism here. But I think of long-termism as this idea that promoting the welfare of the future and future generations is among the most pressing problems of our time. And I agree with this. I would personally have disagreements with strong long-termism, which says that it is the overwhelming concern and it's the only cause we should care about. But I absolutely agree it's among the most important. Again, my personal view is that, though, if we prioritize strong long-termism in this view that it's of overwhelming importance, future generations, then we might actually fall into a hubristic trap where we actually assume we know more than we do about how to impact the far future. And that is also very resonant with biblical themes about, just look at the Old Testament. Like, look at how many people who, because of their pride and because of their arrogance, made terrible decisions that hurt a lot of people around them. So I don't think that by thinking more about the future, that has to happen. I'm a bit wary of only talking about the future, because I don't want the discussion to get hubristic. Yeah, that's my view. Yeah, Luca?
So I understand that a lot of the EA approach is looking at the just hard evidence for the best, most effective means of giving and so on. I'm wondering kind of like on the Christian EA approach, is there then kind of like a meta analysis of how can we do most effective giving, and also how can we do that in a way that's distinctly Christian, or if there isn't, how can we delve into the most effective ways of distinctly Christian giving?
That's a really good question. So the question is, how do we as Christians in the effective altruism movement or wrestling with these ideas have a distinctively Christian approach to giving? And that's a good question. So one resource I would mention is Alex Ratty's post about what is a Christian charity and how do we define Christian giving? How do we make sure it's not tribalistic and that it's really based on some like robust distinction that we see reflected in scripture, but also just in common sense. And I'm going to take a mini punt on that because I think that's a really nuanced topic and it can get really misinterpreted, like what is Christian giving. But yeah, I think we can still give effectively in Christ's name. And we have actually a giving fund that lets you give all charities that we believe in the global health and poverty space are plausibly the most effective for specific outcomes like saving lives. And you can give God the glory for that. You can share with your friends. Like, I do this not because like, not because like I want to get credit for this or because of secular ideas, but because of what Jesus has done in my life and because of the love I want to show other people. So we want to support you in that, yeah. But a lot of discussions we could have about like what Christian giving looks like. So with that, I'm going to wrap up and really appreciate you for being a captive audience. And yeah, thanks again. Cool. Yes, yes.